As Rangers fans, we know that a goaltender is the backbone of a hockey team. At Abundant Wealth Management, we are your financial backbone, offering financial planning, wealth management, tax planning, and estate planning services. To schedule your free consultation, head to www.abundant-wealth.com. That's www.abundant-wealth.com. Abundant Wealth Management. Live, plan, triumph.
You're listening to Rangers Radio, your home for end-to-end coverage of the New York Rangers. With your hosts, Brendan Azoff, Zach Domino, and Steve Pappas. Blue Shirts fans, the puck drops now.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Rangers Radio. Brendan, Steven here today. We are missing Zook, but he told us to pass along a message of positivity. He thinks the Rangers are getting into the playoffs. I know Steven's not on board with that, and I'm 50-50. So that's why all three of us do the show together, because we do even each other out. But today is the trade deadline episode. We have the trade deadline tomorrow at 3 p.m. We're going to talk about the loss in OT last night to the Washington Capitals, the Rangers trades of Reilly Smith, Ryan Lindgren, Vesey, and we're going to talk about maybe some potential targets that could be out there for the Blue Shirts as well. But before we dive into all that, Steven, how's everything going?
It's been a long day. Had to drive to Buffalo. Got TSA clear done, so we're all good. They just scanned my eyes, and now they have my eyes in the database.
Yep, your retinas are in the government.
Exactly, they're right in the government. The best wings, if anybody's ever in Buffalo or Rochester or whatever, Barbill either east, north, or the original one, which was too far for me to go to. But if you're ever looking for good wings, Barbill is the place to go. I know other people have different opinions about their wings in the Buffalo area. It's a contentious topic to talk about. But I also found out, this has nothing to do with the Rangers, but blue cheese is the way to go around here. I
can't do blue cheese.
I can't get blue cheese. It's awful. So I get ranch, and I get looked at like I'm a psychopath because it's this industry standard here. You have to have blue cheese with your wings. That's disgusting.
I'm lactose intolerant, so people look at me like a psychopath when I just rip them without any type of sauce on it.
But that's how they're supposed to be eaten. They're supposed to be eaten without sauce.
But now, especially up there, man, you go Rochester, Buffalo, and you don't do blue cheese, people look at you like you have four heads. It's crazy. Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about Rangers. This is not a blue cheese show, so we're going to steer clear of that, but it is a blue shirt show. And there was a lot going on yesterday with the Rangers Capitals game. Honestly, better than I thought it was going to go. I know that you might have been on this wavelength as well, but after two wins against subpar teams, 4 of 5 against teams below 500 or, below them in the standings, at least, you start to get these vibes going again where it's like, okay, the Rangers could make the playoffs. They're sitting in the 8th seed, but now you have to host the number 1 seed in the East, the Washington Capitals. I had that game going a lot worse than it did. I thought they were going to get ran out of the building, similar to how they have the first two meetings, I should say, against the Washington Capitals this year. But they were, I think, the better team through major stretches. And then in the third period, they had the lead. They sat back. They do what the Rangers do. Washington kept on pushing. And Ovi, of course, is the one that pots the goal. He is now 9 away from tying Gretzky and 10 away from surpassing it, which is just crazy to say out loud. But ultimately, it was Tom Wilson, of course. Always Tom Wilson. He's always in the middle of it. But what do you think about that game watching it? Because I know you have a much more negative lens than Zook does, and Zook is always blowing up the chat with this positive messaging. So,
yeah, and I mean, listen, being a part of history is, if they weren't in a playoff push, I could appreciate it a little bit more, seeing Ovechkin tie that game. But, from an outsider's perspective, that he's going to break the record this year, which is an absurd thing to think about. Is he going to do it in less games? Is he close in the game category?
I don't know the game category. To me, he will be the greatest goal scorer of all time, which is crazy to say, 1, and 2, crazy that we actually got to watch it. Because, I've heard parents talking about Wayne Gretzky, how cool he was to watch, but obviously we got to see little bits of the tail end, and it's just a figment of our imaginations. But to see Ovechkin do what he's done is nuts. But I think that ultimately him and Crosby are going to wind up retiring and going down as like this 1-2 combo throughout the entire career, that where other teams in the East could have wound up having success and excelling was stunted by those two guys single-handedly. It's crazy to see the run that we've seen over the last 15, 20 years from the two of them.
And I heard Darren Pang mention that Ovechkin's doing it in a more offensive friendly environment. Isn't that just wrong? right? That's wrong.
I don't know what the goal scoring trends are this year, but to me, the goaltenders are significantly better.
For at least the first
than what
10
they
years of his career, he was in the dead puck era.
Dead puck era. The goaltending statistics, I know they're down a little bit this year, but you're telling me that the goaltenders that weren't even dropping or just starting to drop, come on. Ovechkin is shooting the puck against, first of all, the equipment's better for goalies. Second of all, the whole style of the NHL has changed. I know there's not as much checking and hitting as there was in Gretzky's era, but it's faster. So the fact that he's still doing it at this age is just crazy. And he's not even, he wasn't noticeable last night until he was, right? It's just like he finds that spot.
He's going to score 40 goals and break his leg in the same year, which is an absurd thing to think about. But we're not a cap show. We can ogle about Ovechkin after he breaks the record at some point this year. But I said this in the chat, and I'll say it for anybody that wants to listen. Since the break, the Rangers have beaten the Islanders twice. They've beaten Pittsburgh, and they've beaten Nashville. Where am I supposed to get excited about? Like, in what realm are beating those teams? Am I supposed to then think we're back on a playoff run? Those are all teams. The Islanders somehow are over 500, but they have 7 overtime losses. So they're over hockey 500, but under 500 in general. They haven't really played. They haven't beaten a quality over 500 team since Columbus, which was before the break. And now how big that game looks as we're heading into post-deadline Friday and Saturday. Going up against both Columbus and Ottawa, who are right ahead of you in the standings. But that was a game that you have to get 2 points. From the start of the game, you start off, again, the 12th time this season, giving up a goal in the first 2 minutes or whatever it is, 5 minutes. They can't start games properly. That's been a trend this whole season. But then to fight back, you get the goal from Panarin, that sweet play that they have, and then you get the goal from Sam Carrick, and you go into the third period up a goal. You go on home ice, up a goal going into the third. You have to win that game. In a game that you have to get 2 points, you can't fumble that. And what I said and what I had seen a lot in that third period that really swung the momentum into Washington's favor, other than the 2 penalties, obviously, which I'm going to be honest, that was the first time I have seen an instance where a goal was scored on a power play with a pending penalty, and then you get the power play. I didn't know that was a rule.
Rare.
I've always assumed that it was if the goal is scored, it comes off the board. I was wrong. Washington didn't score in the second power play, but it really swung the momentum, and it felt like the Rangers got into a track meet with Washington, and you're not going to beat most teams in the National Hockey League, let alone the Washington Capitals, in a track meet. The Rangers simply just don't have the speed to do it. They got away from what made it the first 2 periods successful and really stymieing the offense. They didn't have a ton of shots for most of the game, but again, come overtime, you had your chances. I believe it was Zach Jones had a really good chance coming down the slot in overtime, and Charlie Lindgren was huge in the game. You have to think that's some sort of retribution for his brother Ryan getting shipped out of here this week. I know they said it in the locker room after the fact, but then you have, the play that leads to the goal. And, I got some shit on Twitter for blaming Mika, but, it's a situation where there's really 3 options that you can have. You can either shoot the puck, which 99.9% of the time that puck is not going in the net if Mika shoots in that situation. But what it does is it probably freezes the play. It probably doesn't end up in a 2-on-1 the other way, or you hold the puck and nothing really happens. Granted, we will be up in arms. You got to shoot. You got to do something with it. But what you couldn't do in that situation is make a hope play. That's exactly what Zibanejad did. He made a hope play to Miller, and if the puck was an inch closer to JT Miller's stick, we might be talking about this in a different light. And what a great play that Mika made to get the puck to JT Miller, but it wasn't. And what it did was it broke out the Capitals, and Zibanejad was stuck down low. Miller was stuck down low, and people are blaming Schneider for how he played that 2-on-1. I mean, it's a 2-on-1 and 3-on-3. Like I get you. If you play this isn't video game hockey, right? It's not like because the pass got across, it went in. This is real life hockey. So you see a ton of guys play 2-on-1s where they force the pass. Because if you think about it, that pass, if Schneider goes down and times that properly, that pass has to go over him, land perfectly on Tom Wilson's stick, and that's just a hard play. Whereas if you just go take the pass, you're letting whoever it was, I don't know if it was Alexi Protas or whatnot, but just come down and basically be one-on-one with Shesterkin in a breakaway, which I am not okay with either one. But I think it comes down to Zibanejad's play. And again, I'm not solely putting this loss on Mika Zibanejad. There's a ton of guys that probably could have played better than they did, and probably could have capitalized on opportunities that they got, but didn't. But at the end of the day, that's the play that then broke out the Capitals in overtime. So nice to get a point, but you really have put yourself in such a hole that you need 2 points, especially if you're up a goal, and especially if you're at home coming into that third period. And of course, it had to be Tom Wilson. He's sort of a Ranger killer. Not really. I mean, he didn't do anything in the playoffs last year, but it feels like every regular season big goal that the Capitals score against the Rangers, it is Tom Wilson. But the real test of your schedule is going to be now. It's going to be the Ottawa game. It's going to be the Columbus game. And you got to play Winnipeg. You got to play Minnesota. You got to go on the road and play. Then you got to go out west at the end of the month. So it's not getting any easier for the Rangers. That being said, their destiny is controlled in their own hands. If they win games, then, you don't have to worry about what other teams do. But again, I harp back to this point. They haven't won 3 games in a row since November. Name me a team that makes the postseason that for 90% of the year can't win 3 games in a row. There's probably not a ton of them. I haven't done the research on it, but at the end of the day, it was a game that you should have won and you didn't, and it stinks.
Yeah, it definitely does. And to play devil's advocate with you here, if they wound up losing at least 1 or 2 of those games against the sub 500 teams, we'd all be up in arms saying, oh, this team got to sell. It's over. It's done. So they took care of the games that they had to win. And that's the reason why now they're tied for the 8th spot in the last wild card position. But like you said, not winning 3 games in a row, it just seems like that's the Achilles heel. And they were in a perfect position last night. And, we kind of talked about it in our group chat, but it seemed like after those power plays that Washington had in the third period, and to me, that was the turning point. Not only the momentum, but the Rangers were so engaged physically. They were chipping the puck in. They were playing a simple brand of hockey that was working, and it has worked for them in the games they've had success in. And then it just became like this, we haven't had any shots this period. We're all going to try to stick handle through everybody, play some hero hockey, try to do everything by ourselves and make the perfect play. And they just got away from what worked, and they escaped with the point. They got to OT, and you're like, 3-on-3, it's a crapshoot. I know the Rangers' record in 3-on-3 this year is not good, but regardless of what the record is, 3-on-3 is one bad mistake or one bounce, game's over. And that's exactly what happened. So like you said, it's not a loss that's on Mika Zibanejad. He's been playing well, but it is a loss where it was avoidable had a different decision be made. And we can sit here and we can second guess it from our chairs on this podcast when we're not in the moment and he's got half a second to make that decision. But the grand scheme of things is there's simple plays in hockey that you just can't make in overtime. And you cannot make a play, whether it's a shot or a pass across the crease, that could take a bounce and break the other team out. And that's what happened. And it stinks because if he made that pass from the top of the circle, we're not sitting here and talking about it because he's in a position to actually get back and defend. But because of where he made the pass below the dots and where Miller was on the back post, there is not an ounce of chance that you're going to catch the guys coming back. And then Schneider went down too early and it's in the back of the net. So you take the point, you live with the point, you swallow it, you move on to the next game. But like you said, you have a couple of days off and then you play the 2 teams that are sitting in front of you right now. And if you can't get up for that, especially after the trade deadline, right? We know Reilly Smith is gone. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but I'm not sitting here thinking that the Rangers are done. Drury doesn't strike me as the guy that's going to be completely quiet on deadline day. So I do expect something else to happen between now and 3 p.m. tomorrow. If you can't get excited for those games and come out this weekend and try to win a couple, I don't know what to tell you. And you might not win both, but these are games where you have to get at least 1 point each. You cannot let these games be 4-point swings where you don't get the 2 points and the teams that you're chasing do. So it's going to be exciting, playoff style hockey. And we'll see what happens. I hate the 12:30 start on Saturday. I know you do too, but you got to play with the cards that you're dealt. And right now they're going to Ottawa, a place that used to be a house of horrors for them. And I don't think it's been much better as of late. So we'll see what they can do.
Yeah, and they have not been good in the early window games this year. They haven't played a lot of them in the last couple of weeks. But last time I checked, they were 2-7, I think it was, in games that start before 3 p.m. this year. So I don't know what to expect going into those 2 games. But like you mentioned, you have to be able to get up for that. And I said it yesterday in our group chat. I was like, I might go insane if they come out last night and start the game slow and with no energy, and boom, a minute and a half in, you're down 1-0, which is just not a way, to play hockey. I mean, granted, they led the league last year in comeback wins. That is what it is. And it is a funny stat when teams when broadcasts bring it up. It's like, oh yeah, the Capitals are, leading in comeback wins behind the Winnipeg Jets and the Minnesota Wild. It's always like, yeah, because they're good. They're good teams.
When you win a lot of games, you're going to have comeback wins.
If you win 50 games in a year, 20 of them, 15 of them, and the way that the NHL constitutes comebacks is like if you're down 1-0 in the first 10 seconds and win the game 8-1, that's a comeback win. Like it's insane to me.
The real stat is what we were talking about earlier this season, how many games you win when you're trailing entering the third. To me, that's the true comeback win.
Yeah, that's a comeback. Not if you're down 10 seconds into the game and, you blow the doors off for the rest of the night. But trade deadline, I mean, listen, we can get right into the Reilly Smith deal that happened earlier today. It was Smith to Vegas for a second and Brendan Brisson. So I don't hate it. I don't hate the fact that you got a second-round pick for Reilly Smith, a guy who you've been holding out for a couple games now. And we saw the Devils give up a prospect and was it a first or a second for Brian Dumoulin today? It was a second for Brian Dumoulin.
It was a second. I think the Rangers got a third.
Was it a third?
Yeah, but it's going to wind up being an early third-round pick based on San Jose's draft position.
So I mean, at the end of the day, you're getting a kid in Brendan Brisson, which, I was, pointed to this, that his father, Pat, is one of the biggest, if not the biggest agents in the National Hockey League, also represents Jack Eichel. So if you want to put your tinfoil hat on to say that the Rangers have his son and Eichel comes off the books in Vegas in 2 years, we'll see what that leads to. But that's for the conspiracy theories. If we have some in the chat right now, that would be one to hold on to. But you got a guy that wasn't really doing much. Like he was an okay player, but being an okay player on a team that, you can't have okay players in your top six. And that's where Reilly Smith really was. And, it didn't work at the start of the year when they played him with Kreider and Zibanejad. It really didn't work for most of the year where they played him. It seemed like he was the most comfortable in the penalty kill. It felt like most of his chances came when they were a man down. And that's also product of the fact that they are tops in the league in shorthanded goals. But I don't hate the deal. I think Drury's been making some good deals, and we dog on him a lot for some of the stuff that he has done over the last couple of years. But the deals that he's made between the Lindgren deal, I know Kakko's lighting it up in Seattle, but Will Borgen has been a good piece to the back end that the Rangers have had. Obviously going out and trading Hedel for JT Miller, and Miller's been I don't think it's, you can't really argue. He's been the best player on this team since he's gotten to the Rangers on February 1st. So the deals that he's made this year have been pretty good without giving up a ton. Giving up the first rounder to inevitably get it flipped to Pittsburgh stings a little bit, because if you wind up making the playoffs this year and things don't go the way you want it to next year, you might be looking at an unprotected first round pick going to the Pittsburgh Penguins, which could suck. But that's a problem for another day. But I don't hate these deals. I really don't. I think he's been doing a lot with a little, and when he's been able to make the big move, and Miller's got a term on his contract, he's been able to make that move. So overall, I'm not as sold on the fact that they're not done. I don't really know where else you can go from here other than, nibbling around the edges, which is what it seems like Drury likes to do when come deadline. Because honestly, when you talk about the trade deadline, this is where I feel like most of the time, and again, if you're able to make the good deal, you see these teams that win the Stanley Cup, they go out and make the 2 or 3 big deals come deadline time. And I'm not saying the Rangers are anywhere near a Stanley Cup contender, but it's usually a seller's market. You usually get these desperate teams that'll give up an arm and a leg for, a guy like Reilly Smith or something like that, for 3 or 4 years down the line, you're like, why the hell was that trade ever made? It's because people get desperate around the trade deadline. So I don't want Drury to go out there and try and, add for the sake of adding and being desperate because they're 2 points out I want him to look more long-term because, the way that they're constructed this year, it's not a cup team. So there's no reason to back the Brinks truck up for really anybody out on the market other than maybe Mikko Rantanen. And you weren't here last week, but I threw the idea out there of Lafreniere and, maybe a top pick for Mikko Rantanen. But again, you don't have the pick this year. So it's a very hard deal to make.
I'm okay with them not making that trade because honestly, a month ago, I would have said, oh, absolutely. But he hasn't really panned out the same way in Carolina that we all thought it was going to work out for him. And there's still something to be said for can a player show themselves when they're not surrounded by that elite level talent like he was in Colorado with McKinnon. We saw the same question arise about Jake Gensel when he was traded. Everybody was like, oh, he's been this good, but he's been playing with Crosby, and he kind of silenced that almost immediately. Mikko Rantanen hasn't done that. So I'm not saying he's not a good player. Let's pause that break there. But what I am saying is that there are going to be a ton of teams that would have been interested when he was a Colorado Avalanche player that might be saying, you know what, we're going to wait and just offer him something as a free agent in the offseason rather than take a chance on giving you a top prospect, picks, and all the other stuff that Carolina is going to be asking for a rental when he clearly was not willing to sign in Colorado and clearly was not willing to sign in Carolina where they acquired him for that purpose, right? So
I'm gonna stop you right there. I'm gonna break a trade for you. Carson Soucy to the Rangers for a 3rd round pick.
Okay, so the Rangers get a defenseman.
Carson Soucy from Vancouver. I hate Elliot Friedman's acronyms for some teams. They're so stupid. Carson Soucy from Vancouver to the Rangers for a 3rd round pick. So some depth defense going in there. Again, don't hate it again.
Not a bad trade. Yeah.
Don't hate it again. So this is what live podcasting does. By the way,
and this goes to the point I wanted to make too, which is we look at Chris Drury, right? And I'm still not sold on him. So we can all leave that in the comments. Don't come at me saying, oh, you love Chris Drury now. No, but his goal for the deadline, as soon as the Rangers started to plummet a little bit, was get rid of the UFAs that you have and get something of value for them. He traded Jimmy Vesey and Ryan Lindgren and got more back than I think anybody here thought they would. And in fact, you could argue that the 2 players they got back might have more value than the 2 players they sent to Colorado, and Colorado sent them a 2nd round pick. So you take that, right? Reilly Smith got him moved back to Vegas, got a pick in return and a prospect who we all don't know, could pan out, might not pan out. Great first name though. But regardless of that, right? 24 hours before the deadline, he was able to do that. Now they have $17 million in cap space for the trade deadline, and this is what could happen. Right now, he can go around, he could shop, and I think he has to shop smart. Right, the last 3-4 years they've been out there big name hunting, looking for the guys that can make a difference and be those big ticket free agents, UFAs at the end of the season that need a place to go. They get them. Can't have that right now. I don't want to see a big name come to the Rangers this deadline. I want to see the proper piece. And there's 3 guys that I was looking at. Carson Soucy was actually a defenseman name on the list, so I'm glad that happened before I could say anything because now I can't look smart. But the 3 forwards that I'm looking at are Ryan Donato, Jake Evans, JJ Peterka, right? JJ Peterka, obviously the most prolific offensive player out of that group. RFA at the end of the year, so he's a controllable asset. Will cost more than the other 2, but that's somebody that's a shoot-first scoring winger. Kind of parallels to what they did when they acquired Vetrano when they were ahead of schedule, right? The guy that can come into a top 6 role and just shoot everything. And the Rangers do need more people like that. Ryan Donato is having one of the best seasons of his career. $2 million cap hit this year, UFA at the end of the year, so you're not really committed to anything if it doesn't work out. But he's a center, and I'm not sold that Parsonen is going to be the guy for the 3C. Maybe they go out, take a chance on Donato and say, plug our 3C role and continue your hot stretch that you've been having this season. And Jake Evans is just another name that's not going to cost too much, but could be a good fit. And, he's got speed, which is something that I like. But Carson Soucy is a right D or a left D?
I'm trying to do as much research as I can on the fly right now. So give me 1 second to figure that one out.
Because depending on his side, I can get behind the
Carson Soucy. I don't know if they really.
He's a left-handed shot, so
he's a left-handed shot. Yeah, so he would be.
So that leads me to think one of 2 things: either the Rangers are just bulking up on the left side and they're going to do a rotation, or one of Zach Jones and Urho Vakanainen is going to be in another trade.
Yeah.
Because to me, they're not moving Calvin DeHaan.
And then, I mean, I hate that. Zach Jones has been great. Zach Jones has been fantastic with this team when he's gotten the roles.
Where I don't want to trade him.
I don't want to trade him either. But, I mean, he is the guy that has got the pseudo target on his back right now, especially bringing in another defenseman. He's the guy with a lot of upside that you could sell a team on. The deal has to be right, but I mean, we're speculating at the moment. I mean, who knows? But I would assume Vakanainen now comes out of the lineup. Or I mean, it could be a rotation between Vakanainen, Soucy, and Zach Jones now. When if Adam Fox comes back, we still haven't heard really anything on him. I'm trying to pull up just some of these analytic numbers, so I'm going to toss it back to you and see if I could share my screen at some point during this.
Well, I mean, the one thing I'll say is that if the choice is getting more of a return for somebody like Zach Jones versus Vakanainen, I'm still okay with getting less and trading Vakanainen. I think that you could actually utilize Jones long term. He's still controllable. He's still young. You finally have given him an opportunity. Well, they haven't given him the opportunity. The Fox injury kind of created it. But this is somebody that's done everything you've asked over the last 2 seasons in terms of going down to Hartford, taking his medicine. And he's done nothing but show you that he's capable of playing at this level and that he's one of the few players outside of Fox and Miller that has the offensive instincts to make a difference in both ends. And I think that defensively, especially the last 3 games, he's held his own. And against Washington, I don't think he looked out of place defensively at all. So if you're going to trust that guy to take 3-on-3 shifts, to run your number 1 power play in a situation like this right now, that's got to be somebody that you keep, even if it's your 3 left defensemen.
I don't know how I think I just screwed that up, but that's Carson Soucy's
that's great.
Analytic numbers. That's not fantastic, but I don't know how Zach does that. I don't know how he shares the screen properly.
It's because he shares it all the time that I think the screens just merge into one.
I think he's got two monitors. I think that's what it is. He just shares one of those monitors, and it ends up being fine because that took up my entire. I don't know what you saw, but my entire screen was gone.
Yeah, no, we saw it. It was clear. Yeah. I will say the only analytics that the Rangers were using for Carson Soucy are
height and weight.
6'5", 208. Yep.
Height and weight. Big guys, which again just doesn't go great with the whole speed aspect of this team being as slower than dirt. But I like this. This is the first time I think I've actually had like a live trade be broken on a podcast. We'll see what happens after the fact. Just because I think we should also mention 50% retained on Reilly Smith as well. The Rangers have 1 more retention spot. I think they've retained on 2, retained on Lindgren, and retained on Smith. So they have 1 more retention spot if that chooses, but they're not really in a financially, bad spot where they can't be retaining salary on guys, which is also puts them in a good spot to get some better pieces back. You probably don't get Brendan Brisson if you're not retaining.
Of course. And I like, why wouldn't they retain right now to get rid of these UFAs and get people back when they have, like we said, $17 million in cap space for the deadline? And even by retaining, they're still increasing that amount because, Vegas took on 1.7 of Reilly Smith's deal. Vancouver took on $2 million. So there's Colorado took on $2 million of Lindgren. So there's still cap space that's accruing. And Carson Soucy is not a UFA at the end of this year. He's got 1 more year left on his deal. So that's another piece where maybe that's the Calvin DeHaan replacement for next year, right? But again, I can't imagine a situation where, let's say they keep Keandre Miller, that you're going to have Keandre Miller, Carson Soucy, Calvin DeHaan this year, Vakanainen, and Jones, 5 left defensemen on your team. Just doesn't really make sense. So there's got to be something else brewing. And this goes back to what I said just 10, 15 minutes ago, that I don't think they're done by selling. They're going to buy.
That was by the way, that was a 3-year outlook on Carson Soucy. I'm going to show the 1-year outlook. It's not as pretty either. So
great. Everything's in the red.
I mean, he's a minus 13 or something like that this year.
Minus 13.
So what have you? But oof, we'll see. We'll see how this goes. But I mean, they're not in a position to add the star players. That's what it is. That's what you're going to get at this deadline with a team that doesn't really know where they're going to end up come mid-April. You you don't want to make a home run deal and not make the playoffs, right? Like you don't have the luxury of knowing that you're going to get Mikko Rantanen UFA for a playoff run because you don't know you're going to be in there.
Yeah, they're trying to add around the edges, which I think is the right thing. I think, like I said, third line center, and I would have tried to bolster the right side of the blue line right now, but beggars can't be choosers. So you got Borgen, you got Fox when he returns, you have Schneider. So the right side is going to be pretty set for the future, but right now you're kind of in a state of flux. How quickly will Adam Fox return? We don't know that. So they're going to get bigger on the back end. And listen, Carson Soucy's numbers might not be good, but we've seen it. Will Borgen's numbers weren't that good this year either. He came over to the Rangers, and all of a sudden I think he's been great since coming over. I think especially defensively. So maybe that big body on the back end will give the Rangers a little bit more flexibility. And we know full well that they're trying to bulk up, right? It seems to be the way that they're going. They want to add some type of speed and skill up front, and they want to make sure that their back end outside of Fox is as big and physical and defensive minded as possible. So those analytics don't show it, but if he's a stay-at-home defenseman and he could be, that type of Calvin DeHaan player next season for him, we'll see what happens.
I don't know if you mentioned this while I was going through all that stuff, but no retention on Carson Soucy, so it's a full 3.25 for whatever the rate is this year, and then 3.25 next year. So no retention on Carson Soucy, but I don't know if you want to start going into the Lindgren deal and the Vesey deal, but I think we've kind of, exhausted our we talked about the Reilly Smith deal for about 5 minutes, and then this trade broke. So,
before we talk about Lindgren and Vesey, I'll put on the bottom of the screen. Chris Kreider's still out. He's still been out of the lineup, and his name's been circling since that news report dropped back when Trouba was still a New York Ranger. That Drury was looking to move him and Trouba. So I still think that Drury might be circling the wagons to see if there's something that could be done here in the next couple days. Now it's just the next 24 hours, but to me this feels like more of an off-season thing that'll happen. But I cannot see any world right now where the Rangers' opening night roster for next season includes Chris Kreider.
It sucks. I mean, it really sucks because I think I said it during the postseason last year. I think he could be a guy whose numbers get up there in the Madison Square Garden rafters. With or without a cup, I still fully believe that. I think 6 months of bad hockey doesn't negate an entire career, and especially in the postseason, what he's done. But it feels like it's not a match anymore. And if you can get a deal, which it doesn't really sound like it's going to, I know Larry Brooks had talked about this is more of a summer deal, but if you can get a desperate team that is looking for a 40, 50 goal scorer at some point, and you can sell him on it for a postseason run, who's dominant net front, who's great on the power play when he gets in front of the net. He's got speed. He might not have a great shot, but he finds himself at the front of the net. You could sell a team in the next 24 hours, now less than 24 hours on that. But again, it would suck to see him go. It's part of the business. I get it. But that's a guy that is going to piss off a lot of people if they trade Chris Kreider. But again, I feel like it has to be done at this point. It feels like there's no saving it.
Yeah, I think it has to be done. I'm not opposed to it at all. I think he is a great Ranger. I'm not going to say was, because even if he gets traded, he still is a great Ranger. I think that the trade has to happen in the offseason, one, because of his status, right? He has a list that he can submit. It's going to be a lot harder to work that deal out in 24 hours. He's hurt, so I don't know how many teams are jumping out the bit right now to get him. The other thing is, like you mentioned, right, there's going to be a lot of people upset, including Mika Zibanejad. If you trade him tomorrow, how does that affect? You're adding Carson Soucy. You're trying to add a couple of pieces right now to make that push into the playoff spot. You're going to upset your $8.5 million center. You're going to piss off that guy right now. So I think that's something that has to happen in the offseason. And yeah, I'm sure people are listening to this going, why do we care if they're upset? They got to grow up. It's a business. It throws off chemistry a little bit. All right. We can't sit here and negate that they're not humans as well. So I don't see this happening tomorrow, but I also don't know where he fits into the lineup right now. Who do you take out? Now, if I was going to take out somebody, it's probably going to wind up being Othman, because I don't think they take out Brodzinski and scratch him. And I don't think Othman should be on the fourth line. I think Berard does a better job in that role right now. So it's just like, are you really going to say, Othman, we're going to send you back down, and Kreider's going to come back in when Othman, I think, has done a fine job in serviceable minutes with who he's been paired with, but that's the nature of it right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're going to have to. That's what it's going to be. You can't have Chris Kreider making, what is it, 8.5 sitting on your bench, 6.5. Sorry, 6.5 sitting on your bench. You just can't do that financially. That makes no sense. Whether Brett Berard or Brennan Othman is playing good hockey or not, it makes no financial sense to have a guy like Chris Kreider sitting on your bench, especially in a postseason run. I mean, again, it's been 6 months of bad hockey for Chris Kreider, but he's been a guy that has produced in the big moments for the New York Rangers in his career. So to not have him, if he's a healthy option, you could call me an idiot if you want, but I think it'd be asinine to keep him out of the lineup.
Yeah,
down the stretch.
You can't keep him out of the lineup. Now, the other aspect too, right? If you look at last year's playoff run, who are the two players that had the highest offensive output for the Rangers? It was Chris Kreider and it was Barclay Goodrow, and Chris Kreider's done that his whole career. So where are you replacing this playoff production from? And to me, that's why this has to happen in the offseason, because you cannot look at this year and say we're going to make a push for the playoffs right now, because that's clearly the goal, right? If they were truly selling, there would be bigger names that are on the market right now and have been for a week or two at this point. So to me, you make a push for the playoffs. Let's say you get in, Kreider plays. Hopefully, he goes nuts. He has a great postseason. And then in the summer, you visit looking at him. You visit looking at Zibanejad, even Panarin at this point, and say, I think that this is JT Miller's team now. I think he's going to become the leader. Trocheck's probably going to stay as the 2C because they're buddies, and that's just what the Rangers do. And I don't think that Trocheck is a huge problem. I think he's having a down year like most people are right now, but I think he does a lot of things, face-offs, penalty kill, that it's hard to replace everybody in one fell swoop. So I would say that if you can go into this offseason adding a 3C at this deadline that you feel comfortable bringing back or is under contract, and you have the ability to approach the three guys that have been the core for the last 5-6 years and see where they're at with their clauses and if they're willing to waive it and if there's even a market out there for them, then maybe you have that conversation. Because I'm not letting, a good 3-week stretch from Zibanejad skew my judgment that that's not something that has to be approached this offseason. And I'm not letting, a couple of good games from Panarin and, all of what he's done over the last 3-4 regular seasons skew what he hasn't done in the postseason and the cap hit that he has on, and he's a free agent after next year. So it's bad business if you don't approach it. So there's a lot that's going to go on this offseason. But in terms of right now in this trade deadline, Kreider's got to play. He's probably not going anywhere. And like we talked about for the first 37 minutes of this episode, it's got to be the fringes that they're adding right now. The lefty and Carson Soucy, that's probably not going to be anything more than your 5'6" defenseman. Go after a third line center. Go after another depth piece if you want it. But it's bad business to not talk to these guys in the offseason, but it's even worse business to start adding and making splashes right now with players that you simply don't have the room for in your top six, and you simply don't have the team capable of winning a cup at this current stage to make that anywhere remotely worth it.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to go through I'm trying to follow along with what's going on right now. But Mikko Rantanen is in the lineup for Carolina tonight, so I'd be very shocked to see if anybody would be on the block if that's the case. But I think it should be time to get into this Ryan Lindgren Jimmy Vesey deal. Bring him back. I can't believe we haven't had an episode in that time. It feels like it happened ages ago, but Juuso Parssinen, Calvin DeHaan coming back to the Rangers. We've seen Calvin DeHaan for the last 3 games. He's looked halfway decent. He's been seemingly a improved version of Ryan Lindgren. He is a big guy that is able to battle in the corners and has been good on the penalty kill. He's been blocking shots. Parssinen left a lot to be desired. Hasn't necessarily played and not necessarily played well in the time that he has played. But he's a young guy, so we'll see what that entails. But I think, and I said it as soon as the trade was done, it felt more like an addition by subtraction trade, and Ryan Lindgren could not have been a part of this team any longer.
No, he could not have been. And that's another guy where we talked a lot of crap about him this year, especially, and rightfully so. He was not good. but you can't ever question his effort. And I think that there's a lot of players on this team that we can. And it's one of those things that's a double-edged sword, right? That he had to go, had to be done. His Rangers tenure was over. Dan Girardi parallels, and it's funny because Dan Girardi was at the game last night. I don't know if anybody saw that, but I'm sitting here laughing. This is the exact parallel everyone's making to Ryan Lindgren's career. There's certain players that are just simply they do too much for their bodies, right? And I think that Ryan Lindgren is somebody that he was doing a lot. He was blocking a lot of shots, taking a lot of hits that he probably shouldn't have. He didn't have the size for the style that he played. And then to couple that with the fact that the only way the Rangers ever saw fit to use him was as the top line left defenseman with Fox, it was just not the right situation for him. And then they trade him to Colorado, and the first thing that Jared Bednar says is, we have Cale Makar and Devon Taves. That's our first pair. We're going to use Ryan Lindgren in a much different fashion. And to me, that's like what we've been saying for years now, is it wasn't as much of an anti-Lindgren thing all the time, but it was an what the hell are the Rangers doing keeping him next to Fox all this time thing. And I think that they kind of continued that snowball, and it became an anti-Lindgren thing this year, and now we're in this situation. But
so let me interrupt you really quickly. No breaking news or anything like that, but that third round pick that was given for Soucy was San Jose's that they got today from Vegas. So basically, you traded Reilly Smith for Carson Soucy and Brendan Brisson. So now you look at it in a different light, but we'll assess when we start to see Carson Soucy, if we see Carson Soucy playing minutes with the New York Rangers coming. What do they play? They play Saturday and Sunday. Is that what it is? Saturday,
Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday again.
Every other day. And that's what it is. That's what it is come March. You play every other day, basically, ramping up for the playoffs, postseason. So, you had to expect it. But I know I cut you off. If you want to continue talking about Ryan Lindgren,
I think there's not much else to talk about Ryan Lindgren. It just is what it is. It's a tough situation for him, and I kind of feel bad that that's how it panned out. But the Rangers had no choice but to move him. He's a UFA. If you're not going to sign him, you got to move him, like we said. And I think they got more for him and Vesey. We can't forget that Vesey was part of that trade, but they got more for both of them than I thought would have been possible. So the fact that they were able to do that, and now you could sit here, now that we know the Carson Soucy news, and go, oh, great. So they got rid of Ryan Lindgren, and then you show those analytics, and they added another one. But
to bring in Ryan Lindgren, but I will say he's probably I'm going to say this, and I'm going to look so stupid when he is paired with Fox, whatever. But you're not playing him in first line minutes. You're not playing him in first pair minutes, Carson Soucy. So you can.
We hope. We hope. This was the first thing that I thought. Now I'm trying to do the research on the fly right now, but I feel like Carson Soucy and Will Borgen were teammates in Seattle.
That is a good. Well, I could tell you Carson Soucy and JT Miller were definitely teammates in Vancouver this year. So there's that connection. I believe they were. Carson Soucy was traded from Minnesota to Seattle in 2021. So, and then he was traded he signed with Vancouver in 2023. So
so their paths crossed in 21-22. So I can't. I don't know what their relationship is. I don't know if they played together or not, whatever. But in my mind, right, if say you move Vakanainen, if your goal here is Fox to come back and Keandre Miller to play with him, and you got Carson Soucy now who is familiar with Will Borgen, well, maybe that becomes your pair. And now you have two guys that big physical presence on defense. You know that Borgen has played well since becoming a Ranger. You know that Carson Soucy's familiar with him, so you hope that could spark something. And now you have Schneider and Jones as your third pair, which we've seen work before. So maybe that's the move and the reasoning behind it. You also have DeHaan, who can fill in any of these spots. So it's interesting. I will say that. And again, this all hinges on the fact that they don't trade Jones and they trade Vakanainen, and the fact that Adam Fox comes back anytime soon.
I am doing more of the research as well to see if Soucy and Borgen played together. What year did you say they were together?
If he was in Vancouver for 23-24 or
22-23.
So then the only year would be 21-22.
He did not. Yes, he did. He did play with Will Borgen. It's actually the way this is set up. He played the most minutes with Will Borgen in Seattle that year. They had an expected goals for of 57%. Not bad. Expected goals for 50, so not bad. It's we probably will see Will Borgen and Carson Soucy playing together. I'd be very shocked if they weren't.
I would be shocked if it happens now, but I would say that once Fox comes back, that's probably a possibility. We got a comment here. Why'd they call up Chad Ruedel? I don't know, but maybe it's because there's another trade pending on the near horizon, and to have an extra defenseman on the roster in the interim. So right now you have 7D, because I think they sent Robertson down and they called up Robertson down,
yeah.
So I think it's just a protection move. I can't imagine anybody's injured now that you added Soucy. He's not going to be playing anyway, so don't think that's as important. But the crazy thing is that they're doing the right thing over the last week, 10 days, which I can't say I would have envisioned that's how it was going to go. And then there's still 16 hours for them to ruin that. So I'm not going to get overly excited, but it's a nice direction to see, because I do think that this offseason is going to be where the major changes come. And you might be a Rangers fan right now sitting here going, Zibanejad's got to go. All these guys have to go. It's a lot harder to do that at the deadline than it is in the offseason when you can actually talk to people. So we'll see how all of that unfolds. But there is a lot of action still to come, and the Rangers are in the thick of it. As of before the game yesterday, they were in a spot in the playoffs. Now they're tied for it, but Ottawa's got a game in hand. But that's their next game. So, in terms of predictions, do you think they take both this weekend?
No, God, no. I think they lose I think they beat Columbus and lose to Ottawa. But I mean, I'm more looking down the line. Like, again, I've said it a bunch of times, and I will reiterate my statement here on this show. I think in the long term, and it sucks to say it now, especially with how close they are, in the long term, it is better off that they miss the playoffs this year. You're able to reevaluate quicker. You're able to almost, because it feels like the way GMs work, and it's not just Chris Drury, but GMs work in the fact that, we made the playoffs, so we can't really be trading everybody. We can't go out and deal Kreider, Zibanejad, and maybe Panarin, or even just Kreider and Zibanejad, because obviously we made it to the postseason, this and that. But if you, in a year where you were supposed to contend for a Stanley Cup, missed the postseason, you can really sit back and think and really justify trading 2 or 3 of those guys if you have to. And there's a market. There is a market for a Chris Kreider. There is a market for a Mika Zibanejad. There is a market
for Jacob Trouba. There's
for
a market
Artemi
for
Panarin. Exactly. And especially in the summer, when you have more time to think about it, and it's not this needs to get done in 24 hours type of deal. 100%, I think that's a thought. And I brought up trading Panarin on this show a couple times already this year, and I think you would be, like you said, you'd be a fool to not even look at it, especially with his contract coming up in 2 years, or not this offseason, but next offseason. So there's a lot going on right now. I will give them credit. I will give the Rangers credit as somebody that works in the news department. Usually these things happen, like these news things break after shows, or after, maybe a minute right before the show, you got to scramble and put everything together. So I will give them credit. It did happen during the show. So it's good for us. It was good for us to talk about and react to it live. It's not a Mikko Rantanen deal or anything like that, where we're basically going to be live for the next 3 hours. But I keep getting fake accounted. I hate this. I just saw Brock Besser's name get thrown in a trade, and that was that reaction, but it was a fake account. So, but yeah, if it was a bigger trade, we'd probably be on for the next 3 to 4 hours. But
I know,
to be able to react to this live was a good one. And I know we got holy Jesus Christ, 370 people in here right now. Comments are open if you want to comment, if you want to hear our thoughts, or just want to get your thoughts out there. We'd be more than happy to field those questions. Also, this is a safe space if you want to vent your frustrations, or obviously we don't have Zook here, so we can't have the positive frame of mind that we normally have.
I've been trying. I played devil's advocate on your one point. I'm trying to pick up the slack for his positivity. And here's a positive thing. So regardless of the Ottawa game on Saturday, which obviously is a massive game, but they have 2 games in the next week against the Columbus Blue Jackets. And to me, that's the team that you're really chasing, because ultimately, if you want, there's been a lot of talk amongst us, ourselves, and amongst everybody in the fan base about catching the New Jersey Devils and how funny that would be this year, right? And the only way you're going to do that is if you can hop Columbus first, because they're ahead of you right now. So to me, that's the team that you really got to circle and chase. And I think Ottawa, that will play itself out. I don't trust Ottawa's consistency at all. And I think that they kind of put themselves in positions that are not great, because when they're playing good hockey, they're a good team. But the problem is they're not playing good hockey that often. So I look at the Columbus game on Sunday as a massive one. And then again, Saturday, March 15th is another game that, if you could win both of those, I like your chances. Now, if you come out this weekend and drop both, I don't know how you sneak in unless you go on some crazy heater. But like you said,
unless the Devils fall off a cliff. And that's the thought, is if the Devils fall off a cliff, which I don't think they're going to.
Again, but even then, you could have 2 Atlantic teams in Detroit and Ottawa that sneak into the wild.
But you could also have Columbus. It's true. Yeah, you're right.
And Columbus would hop to 3. But when I look at their schedule, right, it means nothing to me unless they can get over that hump of 3 games in a row. You mentioned they hadn't done it since I think it was mid-November. If you want to get in, you have to do that. And I feel like this is the type of team where if they can get over that and actually win game 3, right? So they win 2 in a row pretty often as of late. If you win that 3rd game in a row, they can go on a run and get into the playoffs. If they find a way to do it, I'm optimistic. If they can't find a way to do it and they keep having these mini streaks and then end, mini streak, then end, it's a lot harder to A, distance yourself from the teams behind you, and B, get over these teams in front of you. So to me, the only way they get into the playoffs this year is if they find a way over the remaining, 20 games now, to get at least 1 win streak of 3+ games, which is crazy that we're saying that the year after this was the best team in the regular season.
They legitimately have not won a three games in a row since November. It is March.
Mind-boggling.
6th. It's funny. I have a clip that I posted on TikTok a month ago. It was quite literally a month ago. It was February 6th, because I mentioned the date. So they haven't won 3 in a row since February, or since whatever, it's February 6th. Here we are a month later. And granted, there was a 2-week break in that span, but you have had plenty of chances to win 3 games in a row, and you haven't done it. So
I know they mixed in, what was it, a 7+ game point streak in there, which helped. And they're on a 3-game point streak right now. So you could wind up having another 5, 6, 7-game point streak that does help you, because at any point, like we talked about, matters. But when you're playing games against teams that are ahead of you, getting 1 point out of the 2 doesn't do anything.
Games have to be won in regulation too.
It's so pivotal.
Giving up a point to either one of these teams.
And this is one of those years where you look at it, right? The Rangers own the tiebreaker. And by own it, I don't mean that they have the edge over these teams. Like, they own it. They have 29 regulation wins, which is the first tiebreaker. I think Ottawa's got 22 or 23. Columbus is 22 or 23. Detroit's far behind them as well. So this is a situation where all they have to do is keep even pace with all of these teams and they get in. Because after game 82, if they're tied in points, the Rangers have the tiebreaker over 4 or 5 teams that are within spitting distance of them. So they control their own destiny, which is scary to say, but they do. And we're sitting here now, March 6th, day before the trade deadline, in a year that in recent memory is one of the worst that they've had because of expectations and overall performance. Yet they still have a chance to get in. And I, as a Rangers fan and as a hockey fan, I don't know who I speak for, but I can never sit here and root for my team to miss the playoffs. If they do, I'm not going to be pissed off because I know that there will be changes. But what do we got? A good 90 years on this earth, right? How many chances do we actually get to see them in the playoffs? So I'm never going to root against that. If they get in, I'll be sitting here on my couch, sweating, stressing like it was last year all over again.
I was gonna say, I felt last night a lot like I was watching a postseason game, and realistically, the rest of the year is going to be postseason hockey. I mean, it's funny. It's a thought that I've had the last couple of days thinking about this team. You know, like when you talk about, I don't know, it's more prevalent, I think, in baseball than it is in hockey. But the team that really has like rest coming into the postseason, usually, you know, sputters out of the gate because, you know, they haven't been playing meaningful games. I think it's a bit overrated, especially when it comes to hockey, because if you're playing postseason games from February on, you burn out. You can't keep playing that style of hockey for 4 or 5, 6 months, basically up until June, and expect to win a Stanley Cup. Like you burn out at some point. So
very rare that it happens in hockey. And the other fact is you don't get rest if you're a 1 seed either.
Exactly.
It's the only sport really where there's not really a reprieve, right? I mean, basketball has a similar thing, but the whole season's a reprieve, so it doesn't really count. Baseball now with the wild card, the number 1 and 2 seeds get a little bit of an advantage. So,
you mean 14 teams in the conference making the postseason isn't a good thing?
You got teams that are 10 games under 500 in a play, and that I don't know how that appeals to people anymore.
14 teams making the postseason in the Eastern Conference. Buffalo would still be out. It's still
now they're on the heels of Pitt, but
dude, as someone that lives in it right now, as someone that lives around a lot of Sabres fans and works at a station that covers the Sabres, like it's sad. Like it's a sad, like as bad as we think we have it sometimes. And I, as a New York Jets fan, I understand. I get what they're going through. It's just sad sometimes watching the Sabres because they have the talent, like they do. I don't understand where the hang up comes with together.
But that's the other aspect, right? Is look how miserable we've been this year. The Rangers social media landscape has been, and they're tied for a playoff spot. It's like, but again, that also goes to show, right? If you put the expectation on the Buffalo Sabres after a President's Trophy that they were going to get in and be a contender, it's disappointing, right? The Sabres don't have those expectations, so it's sad and it sucks for them, but it's like same old. Rangers came into the season on the heels of an Eastern Conference final where they lost to the eventual Stanley Cup champion, on the heels of a President's Trophy winning season, and they just laid an egg after Game 6. So it sucks, but they've played much better since January 1st.
Yes, they have. But again, they threw themselves in such a bad hole that it's hard. It's really hard.
But they're 6 points back in New Jersey. They're 1 point back in Columbus, tied for the last spot with Ottawa. So they're right in the thick of things. And, you know, I keep seeing, they have the second hardest schedule the remainder of the season. I don't care. You have to win the game.
You got to win the games. Like it's not negotiable at this point. Who cares who you're playing against? You have to win these games.
You have to win. And if you could start beating these good teams now in the home stretch where you're playing games playoff style, well, then you start to build some confidence going into round 1. And I'm telling you right now, I do not have the fear that I would have as the 8 seed playing Washington as I would as the 7 seed if I wound up playing Florida. So I'd rather either finish 8 or 3rd of the Metro, but you give the Florida Panthers the Rangers in round 1, and I think they'll be golfing within a week.
Yeah, not even close. I mean, they're Panthers. I honestly think, they played better against Washington last night. Again, sorry, I am multitasking like a motherfucker at the moment, but you give them, they played better against Washington yesterday. I still think if they play them in the postseason, it's a 4 to 5 or 5, maybe 6 game route. I don't think it's ever close. I think Washington has magic.
I can't say that because I think that just circling the playoffs turns it on. And I think it becomes a much different game where right now Washington has had everything go right. The playoffs can sometimes throw a wrench into that. So we'll see. Listen, this is a year where if Ovi winds up breaking this record before the season ends, then yeah, you don't want to play them because they just got that aura about them where it's like we have some team of destiny type attitude. But I don't have that same fear. And I know you could look at the season the record against the Rangers and be like, oh, well, you should. But I know what Florida does in the playoffs, especially if Tkachuk comes back. I know what the Rangers have done historically against Washington. And I know this is a different year, but sometimes you meet the same team in the playoffs again and you're like, oh, we got to get over this hurdle. And it's very hard to do. How many times do we see pitchers dominate in the MLB? But there's one random dude on one team that can't hit anybody else in the league, but it's batting like 600.
Who's the guy that hit a tank off Chapman in the COVID playoffs? Not Brett Phillips for the Rays. I'm trying to remember the name.
There's so many guys in the playoffs that hit tanks off Chapman.
Fair enough. I don't know if it was Chapman, but it was late in the game against the Yankees. That's just a guy that always comes to my mind. And I'm not a Yankee fan, but that's just a guy that comes to my mind that made a name off of basically like one postseason run or home run.
There's a first baseman that used to play for the Rays. I think he was with Pittsburgh last. He had 3 names. Something Chin maybe?
No, I'm now going through it.
He had Garrett Cole's number to the fact that Garrett Cole was like, I'll intentionally walk this dude every time he's up. He couldn't get him out.
I think it might have been that guy. Or no. Oh, Mike Brasso. That's what it was. Mike Brasso.
Oh, I do remember that run. He had the walk-off home run to end the series.
Yep. Mike Brasso. That was the guy I was thinking of. That
Already
that
miserable talking about the season of disappointment for the Rangers. Now you're making me relive that crap. All right.
Hey, listen, my dad made a good point. He said it's baseball season. It's if by the time if the Rangers are out of it by mid-April, you watch the Mets. In your case, watch the Yankees.
Baseball does not start for me until after the Cup's over, no matter if the Rangers are in it or not. So it's 7:00, right? So let's do the predictions before we wrap up. We got Senators on Saturday, Blue Jackets Sunday, the Winnipeg Jets on Tuesday, and then the Wild on Thursday. I will not be able to do the show Thursday. If you and Zook are running it, go for it. But let's do those 3 games of the Senators, Blue Jackets, and Winnipeg Jets.
Senators, Blue Jackets, Winnipeg Jets, 1-1-1. I think for optimistic sake, let's go overtime against Ottawa, beating the Blue Jackets, and the Jets. You got to go out to Winnipeg to play that game. So let's just go 1-1-1.
All right, I'm going to be the positive guy then because I got to fill the role of our boy Zook. I'm going to go 2-0-1. I think they lose in overtime in Ottawa. I think they win against Columbus, and I think that they do get a win in Winnipeg. So, and I think that win might be one that kind of catapults them a little bit. But
interesting.
It's been a season of point streaks, right? I mean, it's got to be at least 45 to 50% of the team's points this year have come during these point streaks. They're on a 3-game point streak right now. They're playing probably their best hockey since the first couple of games of the season, at least defensively. I think they go on another one here. I don't think it's going to be a win streak, but a point streak. So.
Something to look out for, and it's down the line. But March 22nd, I believe it's a Saturday, is Philip Heedle's return to Madison Square Garden. Rangers and Canucks.
You should get a very nice ovation.
He needs to get a very nice ovation. If you're going to the game, we got 420 nice people in this live stream at the moment. If one of you is going to that game on March 22nd, you better be up cheering for Philip Heedle. I mean, I don't really envision a situation where that's not the case, but he's I
can't wait to that video tribute. Just going to literally be the shift.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's the shift.
It's just going to be the minute-long shift.
It's the shift. It's Ray Ferraro's Nevermind.
Oh, yep.
It's the overtime winner against the Devils where he went barn in. I'm trying to think of anything else that he would have had.
He had a couple of big moments. He had a couple early in his career. He was doing that. He would come down the right side in his off wing. He would cut to the middle, chip short side. He bowled over Tuukka Rask one of those times. I remember that. He had some big goals in his career, man.
Is that what's no? That didn't start the Lindgren Marchand beef, did it? Was it?
I don't think that did. There was something that actually happened between the two of them.
Interesting.
But, well, we'll see what happens. We got 7:00 now. Trade deadline's 3 p.m. tomorrow, so there will be a lot of stuff going on. We had the Carson Soucy trade break here. We talked about the Reilly Smith trade that occurred earlier. So don't be surprised if by tomorrow evening the Rangers have a couple of different players on their roster, and we'll see who stays, who goes, who comes in. But it'll be exciting to watch. I have a feeling that this deadline is going to be a dud for the big names, but you never know. Something might surprise us. But the Rangers don't need big names; they need the right names, and we'll see if they could do that.
Did one last check of social media. Nothing's broken in the last 5 minutes that we need to talk about. So I think it'd be safe for us to end the show now and deal with the repercussions if something happens at 7:08 and we got to deal with that after the fact.
We'll do a short little video if that's the case. We appreciate all of you for watching. Hopefully this weekend goes smoothly. 2 huge games for the Rangers in the playoff race, and they're back in the thick of things. So if there's anything that could be said to salvage the season, it's at least we have meaningful hockey to watch in the home stretch, and we hope it stays that way through the end of the year and at least into the first round of the playoffs. So thank you all. Steven, it's been fun.
Yes,
sir.
We'll
see you guys next week.
See you guys.